welcome into the Penn State 365 podcast presented by Happy Valley Insider of the Rivals Network, covering everything Penn State athletics on the field of competition and on the recruiting trail. My name is Dylan Callaghan-Croley, beat writer, recruiting analyst, a little bit of everything over at Happy Valley Insider. I'm joined by two people you haven't seen in quite a while, but still friends of the site, and two of my co-hosts, Anthony Hazan and Marty Leap. Gentlemen, it is not any normal episode here on the Penn State 365 episode. It's a little bit of an emergency podcast because on Friday, not only were me and Marty at our favorite teams' respective opening days, but on our way home from both teams' opening days, Penn State picked up a commitment from their biggest target in the entire 2024 recruiting class, Quinton Martin, out of Belle Vernon, Pennsylvania. Near five-star prospect, top 40 in the country in the Rivals 2024 rankings. This is as big as they come for the Nittany Lions, arguably their biggest commitment since Micah Parsons, when you consider the prospect, what they mean in state, and the overall talent. Marty, let's start with you. I obviously have quite a few thoughts, and we'll get to some of his quotes and more. But Marty, let's start with you. What is your just immediate reaction to Quinton Martin? And what was better today, that standing ovation Coach got at the Pirates game, or driving home and seeing that Quinton Martin tweet come across Twitter?
Yeah, they were both pretty great. You know, I was about an hour out from home or so whenever it came across that Quinton Martin had committed to Penn State. And, I mean, this is something that there had been some rumblings throughout the week. And, you know, tip of the cap to you, Dylan, for being the first person to report on that across the Penn State message board earlier in the week, that there was a chance of Quinton Martin pulling the trigger on Friday. And that's exactly what happened, and it's awesome. Like you said, big commitment. One of the best players in the country, definitely the best player in the state this cycle, top 50 kid. Could be a high-level player in multiple positions. Definitely seems like at Penn State's going to be running back all the way, where it just, you know, has a chance to step in and take over for Nick Singleton and Katron Allen here in a couple years, and just keep the train of elite running backs churning at Penn State. And, yeah, just big get. I mean, I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that Quinton Martin committed to Penn State. Maybe it's a surprise it happened this early, but there's a lot of positives in that too. Get the kid in early, let him be a leader of this class, let him be able to peer recruit, and, you know, reap the benefits of it. So just, yeah, tip of the cap to the Penn State staff, and, you know, and not just for the recruiting efforts, but it was always reported that this was a recruitment where NIL was going to be a big thing. So tip of the cap to everyone involved there to make sure Penn State, who NIL has been hit or miss at times, to make sure they had all their ducks in a row there to get something lined up.
Yes, I do apologize for the typing in the background. I'll make sure to mute my mic going forward. But as Marty did say, we future casted Quinton Martin on Tuesday, I believe, late Monday night, early Tuesday. We future casted Martin to Penn State. Got a story up on that on the boards. We said on Tuesday afternoon that we heard Penn State was going to be pushing for commitment very soon, and that, yes, NIL was going to be a big part of this recruitment, but Penn State was ready to be aggressive on that front when it came to Quinton Martin. Don't know what, you know, the details are in terms of that, but we know that they were willing to be aggressive, and I'm sure they were in this recruitment. Quinton Martin, that being said, is the seventh commitment in Penn State's 2024 recruiting class, which moves the Nittany Lions up to seventh in the Rivals team recruiting rankings. He continues what has been a hot stretch for the Nittany Lions. Last week, they picked up one of their other top targets, cornerback John Mitchell out of Jacksonville, Florida. They also picked up, of course, Luke Reynolds 2 weeks ago, a tight end out of Cheshire, Connecticut. And at the beginning of March, they picked up defensive back Kenneth Wosley out of Imhotep Charter in Philadelphia. But 7 recruits now in the class, 4 from the state of Pennsylvania. The Nittany Lions are once again dominating the state. But Anthony, what's your thoughts on Quinton Martin joining Penn State's 2024 recruiting class?
Yeah, no matter how you want to spin it, it is a huge commitment for Penn State. You know, anytime you have a borderline 5-star player in your home state, number 1 player in the state of Pennsylvania, you have to get him, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And shout out to James Franklin and the staff. They were able to get this done. You know, Martin is a tremendous player, a tremendous athlete. He provides versatility position-wise. He obviously was being recruited as a running back, but he can play linebacker, he can play safety, he can play wide receiver. So you can really use him in multiple ways at multiple levels of offense and defense. And that is something I think that the staff is going to be very excited to experiment with, especially in his first year when he gets back onto campus. He's 6'3", 205 pounds. I mean, yeah, just a truly special player. And, I think Anthony Specca deserves a huge shout out for this one as well. He was obviously very close with Quinton Martin. I believe he reported on that multiple times. They've been best friends since they were kids. I believe he even tweeted that since they were 11 years old. They've been really, really close. And, to have one of your best friends in the class that you're going to be able to play with at the next level, I'm sure that was a huge draw for Quinton Martin as well. So, yeah, just a lot of things working in Penn State's favor in this one, and they were able to get it done at the end of the day. So, yeah, a big-time commitment, and to get a kid like that in the class this early. This is the third year in a row that Penn State has landed the number one player in the state of Pennsylvania, Nick Singleton in 2022 and Javen Williams in 2023. So, yeah, continuing to dominate the state is incredibly important to the fan base, and it's also important to the staff. So, yeah, love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, you said it great. And let's get to some of the quotes from Quinton Martin. We can talk more about his recruitment as we go along. But here's what Quinton Martin had to say to Rivals about his commitment. Penn State has always been my dream school ever since I was a little boy. Ever since they started recruiting me, they've shown me nothing but how committed they are to me and my family and how they're going to do anything to help me thrive at their university. Coach Sider and Coach Terry have been recruiting me ever since my freshman year, so I've created a great bond with them. We are all really tight. Me and Anthony Specca have been tight ever since 5th grade. Tamir Robinson and I started getting close my freshman year. The same thing with Mont Payne. I'm sure we're going to recruit a lot of the nation's top athletes. We're going up the next weekend for the spring game. I'll be going on my official visit June 9th through 11th with my family. He really put it great there, and a lot of what you said. This was not just Penn State staff that won this recruitment. This was a total team effort by Penn State. It was the staff. It was fellow recruits and guys who are now on the team, as he mentioned. But I mean, just the level of commitment this is for Penn State. This is yes, he was the top player in the state, but it's not like this is a kid who was ranked, 200 in the Rivals 250 or something like that. This was a near 5-star kid, a kid who was a 5-star up until our latest ranking, just dropped a little outside of 5-star ranking, could easily get that back. But everybody in the country was after this kid. I mean, Ohio State was after him. Let me look at the rest of his offers. But everybody in the country was after this kid. Over 20 reported scholarship offers: Florida State, Michigan State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, South Carolina, Texas A&M, Virginia Tech, Wisconsin, among others. This was a hard recruitment to win. Other schools were showing interest, like Miami. This is a huge win for the Nittany Lions, even if it is an in-state kid. This isn't a recruitment they've always wanted to pass. Julian Fleming, a kid right in their backyard, visited a ton of times, just like Quinton Martin. And we'll talk about Nicholas Marsh in a little bit, who's just on campus Friday. But Quinton Martin was on campus a ton in his recruitment, just like Julian Fleming was in his. But at the end of the day, Fleming picked Ohio State over Penn State. Now, Penn State gets the kid in the end. And I know Fleming was a top 10 talent, but I think this may be a little bit bigger of a commitment for the Nittany Lions than a Fleming commitment would have been. But let's just talk about those quotes. What do you think it means for Penn State from your guys' perspective about what this can do for them going forward? I personally think this is a type of commitment that can open the eyes of other top athletes across the country. You're not going to see a run of prospects per se, all jumping in. But you look at this, you look at other kids they have had come in, visit across the country. Nicholas Marsh, one of them who was on campus today, one of the top wide receivers in the country, decommitted from Michigan State last month. They got him on campus this week. Jalen Harvey was on campus this week, and Dylan Stewart was on campus today. Other guys they've had in the past, T.A. Cunningham out of California. They've had a lot of top talent on campus over the last few weeks and 2 months. And I'm not saying they're all going to commit, but I definitely think this is one that can open the eyes of other players. Anthony, we'll start with you. What's just your thoughts on the potential impact of this Quinton Martin commitment?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You start off with the quotes, and anytime, a kid talks about, oh, Penn State was my dream school, I grew up watching Penn State. I grew up watching players like Saquon Barkley and all those other guys. It really endears, Quinton Martin to the fan base because the fans love reading that. It makes him easy to root for. Obviously, we love our in-state kids at Penn State. We love kids that, are from Pennsylvania, grew up in PA, and then go to play for Penn State. So he'll be endeared to the fans just from that to begin with. But in terms of how it affects other, recruits and their recruitments, there's no, hiding that, 5-star players or borderline 5-star players can have a big influence on other kids in their class. That ranking, as much as we say stars don't matter, it does matter. It carries weight for a lot of these kids. So, I look at last year with Alex Birchmeyer, he committed super early. He was a 5-star, borderline 5-star kid throughout the entire cycle. And I think that him committing so early definitely had an impact on other guys that they were able to get into the class. I think Quinton Martin has a great opportunity to be like a class leader and to lead by example and to help really get some of these kids to Penn State and get some kids in the class. So, yeah, I think from that standpoint, it's huge to get him in the boat pretty early with 9 months or so left until signing day.
Great points. Marty, what's your
Yeah, the peer recruiting's big. I mean, like you said, people can say all they want about recruiting not mattering, but it matters. This is an area where it matters. When you have a kid like Martin who not only is highly rated, but is very active on social media, and you have him saying about Penn State being his dream school since he was a kid and wanting to do all he can to bring a national championship to Penn State and that sort of thing, that stuff registers with other recruits. So, I mean, yeah, this is only going to help with Penn State. And not just this cycle, but, you can see the ripple down effects in the next cycle or two also for other kids from the Pittsburgh area that Quinton Martin can be close with. Yeah, it's only going to do good for Penn State. And, it's a recruitment that goes deeper than just bringing in an uberly talented player, but also bringing in someone who can do a lot of peer recruiting and a lot of good peer recruiting for Penn State.
Absolutely. Anything else you guys want to talk about on the Quinton Martin front? Obviously, this is a huge commitment. We could probably talk about the impact of it for hours to come, but there are some other topics we do want to cover in this podcast. But I think at the end of the day, the big thing about this Quinton Martin recruitment is that this was a recruitment that Penn State had to be aggressive on all fronts. For people who are worried about NIL, this should be one that is a little bit of a comfort, I would say, because NIL was always going to be a big part of this recruitment. I'm not saying the only reason Quinton's only in it for the NIL. But when you're talking about this level of a kid, top 50 prospects, top 100 prospects, NIL is always going to be big for them most of the time. There are rare exceptions like an Alex Birchmeyer. And I don't blame kids for putting NIL high on their list. But I think Penn State has shown that they're going to be aggressive going forward to the extent that they could be in the NIL space. And it's going to work out for them. In some cases, yeah, they'll get beat in some cases when you go up against SEC teams. But that's not always going to be the case, of course, either. But overall, this is obviously a huge commitment for Penn State. It is a massive rain on their current trail. Continues what has already been a hot streak when you count in what they've done with the 2025 class already. They could add more in that class in the upcoming months as well. It continues the hot streak, but the peer recruiting part is just huge for them, I think, as well. And I'm very intrigued to see what happens next, what happens from here, because they're definitely in the running for a wide range of guys here that I think we could see a nice little run for the Nittany Lions between next weekend or even this upcoming week and all the way through the end of June. So any final thoughts on Quinton Martin, his impact for now?
Yeah, I'll just add quickly. I think it's just the nature of the beast with NIL these days, especially for top talents like Quinton Martin. You're going to need to be able to balance, wanting to bring in kids that, are football players first and they want to come to a school for all the right reasons, while also being able to be competitive in the fact that, hey, other schools are going to, be presenting NIL opportunities to this kid. You have to be able to do the same thing. And as long as Penn State is going to be able to do that moving forward, I think this is a very positive sign that, they're really starting to get their ducks in a row. They're starting to figure these things out. And yeah, you can still bring in the right kids, that want to be at Penn State while also, being able to be competitive in that space. It's a balance that can be done.
Agreed. Marty, what's your thoughts?
No, I think, Anthony, like you said, it's a fine line to toe. You don't want these kids, coming to you solely for NIL. That's how you end up with, like a Jaden Rashada type situation. But at the same time, you've got to take care of your players. You want to find the guys who fit the Penn State mold, who fit the Penn State culture, and then you take care of them accordingly. And I feel like that's what the staff is doing a good job of getting done.
All right, let's move on to some other topics here before we wrap up this podcast. A couple quick hitters we can talk about. First, quarterback Michael Van Buren. I want to call him Martin every time. But Michael Van Buren was on campus this week once again. We put in a future cast for him as well. Penn State's doing very good there, very well there, that to say the least. I think right now it's probably Penn State and Oregon at the front of that pack. He does have official visits set for June as well. But most notably today, right before we started our podcast, he tweeted out that he will be making his decision, it looks like, on July 8th, I believe it was. He didn't officially say that's his decision date, but I think we can guess that's what it will be on 7-8 is a commitment. But again, we do have Michael Van Buren as well. Michael Van Buren future casted to the Nittany Lions. I did so myself, but also Adam Friedman, national recruiting analyst for Rivals, also future casted Van Buren towards Penn State. Guys, Michael Van Buren is one of the top targets left on the board for Penn State. Is a little bit on the smaller side, a Trace McSorley type build here, but this is another recruitment that Penn State would love to win here early in the 2024 recruiting cycle. And if you can get Van Buren and Martin in the same class, this is very quickly potentially going towards one of the best, if not the best, recruiting class Penn State could possibly have under James Franklin. Because there's a couple other guys on the board that are very high in the rankings that they could easily land this cycle, and I think they're going to be in the mix for some other guys down the road as well, who we may not necessarily think they may be in the race squarely for right now, but there's always a few that are surprises as the cycle goes on, I think is fair to say. Marty, I guess we'll start with you there. What's just Michael Van Buren, what were your thoughts on him? How much would you like to see him in the blue and white?
First and foremost, I think Van Buren would be a terrific pickup for Penn State. I mean, we talked about it a little bit before we went on the air. This is a kid, if he was like 2 inches taller, you're talking about a legit like top 100 across the board.
Agreed.
Prospect, maybe borderline 5-star, top 4, 5, 6 quarterback in the class guy. He does it all well. He's got good arm strength. He can move well in the pocket. He makes good decisions. He can read a defense. He's got all the tools you want from a quarterback other than his size. That said, he's still a really damn good quarterback. Combine that with him being a St. Francis kid where, listen, if you're listening to this podcast, odds are you know the struggles Penn State has had recruiting St. Francis. You'd love to get him on board. And I will say for his recruitment itself, maybe this is me reading too much into things, but a previously unplanned, seemingly out of the blue visit one day, and then all of a sudden the very next day you're setting up your commitment plans, you can probably read the tea leaves on that one. I'm sure he'll stay, as of now, I'm sure he'll still take his official visit to Eugene, but I think we all agree we wouldn't be surprised if he wrapped this up before official visits. Penn State seems to be in a great spot here. And like I said, he's a really, really good quarterback. And you combine that with him being a St. Francis kid, and this is a commitment you really want to land if you're Penn State.
Definitely agree on that last point. I think it's a good point you bring up about, he comes off a visit the next day, he schedules or tweets out a potential commitment date. Maybe it's just coincidental. Maybe it's not. I'm not totally sure. I haven't asked around or anything. Last time I heard, which was a couple days ago, I was told don't expect anything anytime soon. That could mean just publicly too. But I do know Penn State feels good about where they sit in this recruitment, and that it's really Penn State and Oregon at this point. We'll see what happens there. But I definitely think you brought up some good points. Anthony, what's your thoughts on Van Buren and his recruitment?
Yeah, I think Marty did a tremendous job there. I think he hit most of the key points on Van Buren. I think the biggest knock on him is definitely his size. He's probably, around 5'10", maybe 5'11". 5'11" makes sense. I believe there's a picture of him out there standing next to Bryce Young, and he's clearly taller than Bryce Young by at least an inch or two. So he's probably like 5'11"-ish, which, like you said, is in the Trace McSorley mold. And I think we all know that Trace McSorley had a lot of success there.
Bryce Young may only be, 5'10", but he's a damn good quarterback.
Yeah, listen, at the end of the day, it's about what you can do in the pocket and outside the pocket. And Van Buren can move. He's got a really strong arm. He's a good decision maker. He's been known as a leader. He's got a lot of the traits, not a perfect quarterback, but he's got a lot of the traits that you would want in a player that could be really, really good at the next level. And I think Penn State really recognizes that. So, yeah, right now I believe Penn State is his only official visit that he has set up publicly. I believe that's going to be June 16th. Please correct me if I'm wrong there, Dylan. But so that is set up. So, we'll see what happens between now and then. But, yeah, as things stand right now, it seems like things are really looking good for Penn State in that one. And, yeah, he would be a really solid quarterback to get in this class. I would be very happy if Van Buren was the guy.
Agreed, and we bring up the height, and it's not like in today's game, short quarterbacks being good is anything new. I mean, you can probably go back to, Manziel? Since Manziel, we've seen a run of short quarterbacks having great success at the collegiate level, and I don't think that's going to end anytime soon. So I definitely don't think height should be any bit of a concern. Yeah, you always like to have a bigger quarterback in terms of, prototypicalness, but whatever, if the guy can ball, the guy can ball. I don't care if they're 5'10", I don't care if they're 6'7". If you can ball, you can ball. And Michael Van Buren can absolutely ball. Moving on to another prospect who I kind of mentioned earlier, wide receiver Nicholas Marsh, top 50 player in the country, I believe, on the Rivals rankings. One of the top wide receivers on the board. On campus on Friday, and Nittany Nation, going back to our old name, Happy Valley Insider has confirmed that Marsh has scheduled an official visit to Penn State. We're working on trying to confirm the exact date, but we have confirmed that he is going to take an official visit to Happy Valley, which is a big development, I think, to say the least. Marsh was a guy that Penn State's always liked, always wanted, but once he decommitted from Michigan State last month, you didn't hear much about the Nittany Lions, seemingly until Thursday night when Marsh tweeted that he was going to be visiting Penn State, and now less than 24 hours later, there's an official visit set up. That's quite big because there's a lot of big names after Marsh here. I'm interested to see how this recruitment goes overall. I've heard NIL could once again be a factor here. So on that end, it will be another test for Penn State if NIL does become a factor. But at the end of the day, it just says, I think, a lot about what Penn State can do on these visits by getting guys who haven't been on campus in a while to set up official visits that quickly, especially when he had to make a new relationship here with Marcus Hagans over the last few weeks since Hagans has been hired. Any thoughts on Nicholas Marsh from either of you? Anthony?
Yeah, a great first test for Hagans here. Obviously, this is a huge one for Penn State. Wide receiver is considered by many, if not all, in the fan base to be a huge need in this recruiting class. You want to get at least a few good ones. And I think Penn State is set up well to at least land 3 or 4 solid wide receivers in this class. And Nick Marsh would be the best of all of them, in my opinion. You can't as I like to say, you can't win the raffle if you don't buy a ticket. And getting Nick Marsh back on campus for an official visit, presumably sometime in June, is a big deal. You know, that's the type of kid that you want to get him back on campus it would be a huge commitment if they could pull this one off, and a huge testament to Hagan's recruiting ability just to even get him to this point.
Agreed. Marty, any thoughts on Marsh here?
No, I think Anthony put it well. Getting to this point speaks volumes of Hagan's, because it seemed to be a recruitment Penn State was completely out of a month ago when he first decommitted from Sparty. Get him on campus. Let's see what happens here. You know, you'd love to land the kid, like you said, top 100 kid, really talented kid. But yeah, nice early test here for Marcus Hagans. If he can pull this off, it's tough not to feel really good about where things are going to go with him as wide receivers coach, and especially in a class where you're probably looking to bring in at least 3, maybe 4 receivers if it's the right fit.
Agreed. And Penn State is in a good spot for guys like Keelan Adams, Dre Hawkins, Jalen Hornsby, and among others at the wide receiver position as well. So that'll be worth watching. With Nicholas Marsh will of course confirm that date and get it up on our boards as soon as possible. But he will be taking an official visit to Penn State. Big development for Penn State as well. Another big name on campus here on Friday. Florida State commitment Luke Kromenhoek, which we were debating on before the podcast how to pronounce that. We came up with 3 different pronunciations. I'm going to go with mine. But Kromenhoek out of Savannah, Georgia, the Florida State commit, showed up to Happy Valley back in October for I believe it was the whiteout. He's now back this on Friday. I don't see him flipping from Florida State, but yeah, I think it is a notable visit, to say the least, for Penn State. The fact that they are able to get him back on campus is pretty big. Still think it's going to take a lot to get him to flip away from the Seminoles, who are definitely getting the ball rolling, or have the ball rolling on the recruiting trail, and are definitely getting started on the football field as well. They'll be one of the top teams coming in the country next year. Any thoughts on Luke Kromenhoek here being on campus?
Yeah, I mean, he's a kid who it has been pretty apparent for a while now that he's Mike Yursich's top target at quarterback this cycle.
Yeah,
like you said, Dylan.
He's definitely, from what I've been told, Penn State's absolute number 1 quarterback target. That doesn't mean they don't like Michael Van Buren. Kromenhoek, they believe is a tier above the rest at this point.
Yeah, like you said, it's going to be very difficult to get him to flip away from Florida State. Has a great relationship with that staff. The Seminoles, like Penn State, going into this season with a lot of hype around them. A lot of people expecting some good things down in Tallahassee, so that always makes it difficult as well. But if there's one thing maybe to watch here, maybe give you a sliver of hope, he's not originally from Georgia. He's originally from the Richmond area. I believe he still has family up in that Northern Virginia area. And few schools in the country have recruited Northern Virginia better the last few cycles than Penn State has. So with this being a kid who's originally from that area, still has family in the area, that could potentially be a factor here. If he wants to be able to be in an area where family could come see him play easily on Saturdays, that's going to be a lot more doable at Happy Valley than it would be in Tallahassee, it appears. So, again, I'm with you. I don't think this is going to happen. The fact he keeps showing up on campus, though, clearly there's some mutual interest there on Kromenhoek's end with Penn State. But, you keep getting the kid on campus, see what happens. But if you're Penn State, as we said with Van Buren, you're probably going to be okay at quarterback this cycle no matter what, because you should get Van Buren. And, hey, if Kromenhoek wants to join the class too, you're certainly not going to say no.
100% agree. And, again, that doesn't mean they don't like Mike Van Buren. Mike Van Buren, I think, is definitely it may not even – it may be a 1A, 1B situation as well. They absolutely want Michael Van Buren. If they could get both, they would absolutely take both. I don't think that's going to happen because I don't think Kromenhoek's going to flip. But, they love both quarterbacks, and they're going to be in a very good spot no matter which one ends up in Happy Valley. My money right now would be on Van Buren, though. Anthony, any thoughts on Kromenhoek showing up on campus?
Yeah, definitely. I think this speaks to the relationship that he has with the staff. he's been pretty adamant that, Florida State, he's solid to the Seminoles. You can debate how true that is if he's showing up other places, but it's clear that he has a great relationship with Mike Yurcich. He has a great relationship with James Franklin, and he respects them enough to come to campus. What that means in terms of, is he not wavering on his commitment? I don't know. Like you said, I would lean towards he's still solid to Florida State, especially if they have a big year this year, which they're expected to have. I think that'll only solidify it, and that's fine. Like we said, we're still in a great spot with Michael Van Buren, and, either way, you're solid at quarterback. But yeah, if he's your number one guy, and it seems like he's definitely Mike Yurcich's number one guy in this cycle, yeah, you keep recruiting him until that ink is dry. So yeah, it's definitely a positive sign that, hey, there's still a little bit of hope in this one if you're Penn State.
Agreed. And let me look at our list of the other guys on campus here, see if there's any we could quickly mention. Stacey Gage, running back from St. Thomas Aquinas, one of two prospects there recruiting at running back position out of that program alongside Jordan Lyle, was on campus. I don't think they ultimately land him, but I wouldn't be surprised if he schedules an official visit to Happy Valley. Penn State's done a very good job with St. Thomas Aquinas prospects, as we know. So he's worth monitoring. Ryan Mack, also out of St. Thomas Aquinas, was on campus this weekend, or on campus Friday. I think they are in a solid spot with him. Linebacker Jalen Harvey out of Maryland. Again, we've brought up in the past, it doesn't look like he's going to take an official visit to Penn State this summer, but not too worried about that. He's been on campus a ton in his recruitment. One official visit isn't going to change any feelings he has about Penn State. He's already seen everything on campus, you would have to imagine. So I'm not too worried about that. I still like Penn State. I still like my future cast in for the Nittany Lions. Let's see. Nicholas Marsh, Jalen Hornsby out of Camden, New Jersey, another top wide receiver prospect on campus. We've heard good things about where they stand with him. Then Dylan Stewart out of Friendship Collegiate Academy in D.C. Going to be tough to land him, but to get him back on campus is really big for the Nittany Lions. We'll see if they get an official visit out of him. And if you get an official visit, anything's possible at that point, but definitely think South Carolina right now has the upper hand in this recruitment. Any names there? Also Trent Wilson, 2025 defensive lineman out of St. Francis Academy in Baltimore, was also on campus. Long ways to go with that one, but Penn State put in some good work here early on. I think their early trends are positive for the Nittany Lions. Way too early to mention, to name any favorites or anything in that recruitment, but I think they're going to be in a good spot to receive more visits and potentially an official visit at some point next year in Wilson's recruitment as well. Anthony, any thoughts on any of those guys?
Yeah, obviously, when you get Dylan Stewart on campus, borderline 5-star player, one of the best players in the country, period. It's a big deal. Even if it seems like a long shot right now, you still fight that good fight, try to get him for an official visit down the road. I'll point to Jalen Hornsby as a guy who it stands out to me. Player from New Jersey, wide receiver, fills a need in this class, local kid. That one just seems like it would make sense if Penn State was eventually the choice. So, yeah, good to get those kids back on campus. And, we'll see what happens with guys like Stacey Gage and Ryan Mack. I know that running back board is very, very wide right now. And obviously you have one already in the boat, and Quinton Martin, your biggest one probably. So, we'll see. They can start to get a little picky and choosy now with that second one. So, that'll be fun to monitor down the road.
And one thing we actually didn't, and I'll let Marty go then, but one thing we didn't mention about Quinton Martin that we absolutely should have is that he brings a ton of position versatility with him. He's coming to Penn State as a running back, but this is a kid who could play linebacker, he could play safety. I mean, you could put him a wide receiver and he'd be fine as well. So, I mean, he's going to be an ultimate weapon. I on the Locked On Penn State podcast the other day, I mentioned that he in a way, he could be almost like Jabril Peppers type player for Penn State down the road. You can put him anywhere and he will be able to make plays. That being said, I think running back is going to be his primary position where he will see most of the snaps. But would anybody be shocked if we saw him line up defensively at one point? I don't think so. Marty, thoughts on any of the prospects on campus or Quinton Martin's versatility?
No, I think Anthony summed it all up pretty well. I mean, Jalen Harvey, I think, is one you got to mention every time he's on campus at this point. Like you said, Dylan, I mean, he knows Penn State inside and out. Honestly, probably a little surprising he hasn't committed to Penn State yet. Definitely get the vibe, though, that's one where the staff is kind of knows what they're doing, kind of biding their time until the time is right to push for that commitment, which I would be willing to bet they're going to try and push for that before that official visit season really opens up here in in early June. So I think Harvey's one to watch. The defensive line, things are interesting. I mean, like I said, anytime you can get Dylan Stewart on campus, get him on campus, see what happens. But yeah, it's a really interesting and intriguing group for a Friday in April to be on campus, and it was a busy Friday, and I'm sure it's going to be a busy weekend in Penn State, and getting ready for the blue-white game next weekend where things are just going to really be nuts. And it seems like that things could be setting up here for Penn State to go on a little bit of a commitment run here as we get ready to head in the middle of April.
I definitely agree with that. I'm hearing good news about potentially some news at the beginning of next week, and then next week with the blue-white game should be fun. We do have one future cast currently close, but another future cast for two Texas prospects in 2025 recruiting class, Keandre Barker and his teammate here, Quanell ex Farrakhan Jr., both out of the Woodlands in Texas. Both are very high on Penn State. I haven't put one in for Quanell just yet, but probably will by the time next week rolls around. But Quanell confirmed that both him and Keandre will be on campus next week. I've heard a lot of good things about where Penn State sits for them. I'll be interested to see if they do end up, trying to commit on the visit, or Penn State maybe wants them to slow things down. You want to make sure these 2025 kids are ready for when they try to pull that trigger to commit. Penn State, we know what James Franklin's how he prefers things after a commitment. He doesn't want guys taking visits. And when a kid commits as 2025, a full year and a half away from signing, that's a long time not to potentially take any visits. So we'll see what happens. And then you add the distance into their recruitment. It's not like they're going to be in the backyard that Penn State can get them up anytime of the year for a visit. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But Penn State does sit very well for those two and for several 2024 prospects who are going to be on campus next week as well. Thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, no, blue-white's always an exciting time. You always kind of expect, you never know what can happen, but you always kind of expect to at least get a couple of commitments off that weekend. Obviously, you've got 70 to 75,000 Penn State fans packing the stadium. It's still a big environment, and they do it pretty well. It should be fun this year, especially now that they have an offensive line room that can support like a full-on scrimmage. So, yeah, I'm excited to see what comes out of that weekend. I know me and Dylan are going to be at blue-white. I don't know if Marty may finalize those plans yet or not. While Dylan's working hard, he's up in the booth, doing his thing, getting his intel. I'll be on the front lines, beer in hand in the tailgate fields, and just, we all have our roles to play here at Happy Valley Insider. So I'm very excited to do my part.
If I am able to make it up, which I'm trying to make it happen, if I am able to make it up, I'll make sure to do my best, Anthony, to guarantee that you're not working solo on that very important job of making sure the beers are indeed being consumed.
Yeah, I'll be enjoying the free food in the press box. So you guys enjoyed that. I'll be enjoying the food, and maybe we'll cross paths. But any final thoughts, guys? I mean, I guess quickly, we didn't get your thoughts on it, but a couple weeks ago, Penn State, it felt like a couple weeks ago. I think it's probably only like 10 days or like a week. But Penn State hired Mike Rhodes to be the next head men's basketball coach. Let's get your quick opinions on that. He did have an assistant, J.D. Briers, a lead for Virginia Tech today. When you consider the circumstances of Briers' wife being the head volleyball coach, I believe, at Virginia Tech, not too surprising a move. Works out in that aspect. But overall thoughts on Rhodes becoming the next head coach at Penn State, and then we'll wrap it. Marty?
Yeah, I think it's a good hire, especially considering the tough spot Micah Shrewsbury put them in. I do think that Rhodes is a very good coach from an X and O standpoint. Definitely going to play a little bit of a different game than Shrewsbury looked to play, but it might be some bumps here in year one because just this roster is obviously being gutted by the portal since Shrewsbury's left. But it definitely seems to be a lot of signs pointing towards Rhodes bringing a lot of his kids from VCU with him. Maybe a few other transfers coming in.
Up his sleeve.
He very well may indeed have an ace up his sleeve, but
don't give me that look,
it looks like Kanye Cleary's going to stick around, which is big. Evan Mahafy's entered the portal, but is still practicing with the team, so it seems like there's a shot they could keep him in the fold. So, yeah, I think it's a good hire. Really good basketball coach, in my opinion. Him being from Pennsylvania, I think helps because he's already going to have a lot of ties and connections in the state for recruiting. And also in today's world of the transfer portal, it's not hard to turn a basketball program around in a hurry. We just saw Micah Shrewsbury do that. So I do think that even if they do take some lumps this year, by year two, similar to Shrewsbury, they could be in position to be competing for a Big Ten or a NCAA tournament berth. And honestly, if he brings kids with him from VCU, lands a few others in the portal, I wouldn't be stunned to see them potentially compete for a tournament berth again this year. But, yeah, good hire.
Anthony, thoughts on Rhodes, and then we'll wrap up this podcast.
Yeah, no, really quickly, I think it's a solid hire. I think Marty did a great job touching on all the key points there. He's a Pennsylvania guy from central Pennsylvania. He's got a lot of connections up here. I think it just made sense from the Penn State standpoint. He's got a successful track record at VCU. He's made the NCAA tournament multiple times. He's able to recruit the region. It just felt like a guy that would come in and he wants to be here and wants to be here long term. So, good job by Pat Kraft to bring in, a guy like that. And, we'll see what kind of success he's able to have moving forward. I think it might be a little bumpy to start year one, just because, again, like you said, we're replacing literally everybody but two people scholarship wise. But, I think, give them a couple of years, and I think, this program could get back to where they were this year. I see no reason why it can't.
Yeah, and we also seen with the transfer portal, you can rebuild a program very fast with the transfer portal. Now, it's hard to do that consistently year in and year out. And, yeah, with the scholarship situation, it's going to be even tougher. But I definitely agree with you. And I think, like you said, this is a guy that I expect to be, as long as he has success, to be at Penn State long term. He is a very good coach, but I think to him, Penn State is, unless a true blue blood call is coming, I think he's going to be very happy being at Penn State, being in his home state, not too far from his family and friends in Monomoy City. And I think it's going to work out for Penn State and Rhodes, to say the least. Any final thoughts, guys, as we wrap up this episode? Blue-white, just a week away at Penn State. Spring football is almost over. It feels like it just started yesterday. But as soon as spring football ends, we go in a little bit of a recruiting lull at the end of the month. But then once June hits, we're back full force into official visit season, camp season. It's going to be fun. And in May, we have the Rivals camp in New Jersey as well. So there should be fun intel coming out of that as well. Any final thoughts? Nope. Marty, you're good. Marty's good. Anthony's good. All right. We'll wrap that up for this episode of the Penn State 365 podcast presented by Happy Valley Insider of the Rivals Network. My name is Dylan Callaghan-Croley. There, Marty Lieb and Anthony Hazan. We'll be sure to be back with you very soon for an episode of the Penn State 365 podcast. And maybe we'll be talking about more good news for Penn State on the recruiting side of things. But until next time, everybody, enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the holiday if you do celebrate. And we will talk to you all real soon.